Our reading this morning comes from Healing Resistance, a radically different response to harm by Kazu Haga. To learn to endure life's challenges with dignity can absolutely be a positive trait. But when it results in a nation of people trying to simply endure trauma, isolation, and living a life without purpose, when people are taught not to speak out about injustice and oppression and to stay in their place, that becomes repression and a form of violence. It is negative peace. It is easier in the short term to sweep issues under the rug and settle for a cheap yet ultimately unsustainable negative peace. It is an entirely different conversation to proactively work against violence and build toward a positive peace that includes justice for all. It requires us to lift the veil off injustice and work to repair the harm. So, does anyone know someone who stuffs or avoids their difficult feelings? Maybe? In fact, I think all of us do this sometimes, and some of us do it most or even all of the time. Human beings do occasionally need to compartmentalize. We put our difficult feelings into a tidy box so that we can continue to function. But if we never open those boxes, our psyche turns into the equivalent of a hoarder's basement. There are boxes everywhere, no room to maneuver, and then the mice and the other vermin start coming in and making things unsafe and causing illness. Our boxed up feelings can become a barricade that separates us from our difficult feelings. When we do that, we are walled off also from joy and awe and wonder. Our life becomes constricted. We have less and less room to maneuver. We lose our capacity to connect with others on anything more than the most surface level. Compassion starts to feel like a threat to that precarious reality because once we start feeling, the boxes might start tumbling and falling over and make a big old mess. Boxing up our feelings this way, refusing to open them, sort through them, is a form of self-harm. It is not a loving thing to do to ourselves. It feels like we're keeping ourselves safe, but in actuality, we're putting ourselves at risk of losing our humanity. We need to understand what our feelings are for. Positive feelings motivate approach behaviors. When something feels good, we're more likely to do it. Negative feelings like disgust or shame or fear motivate avoidance behavior. When we sense a threat, we move away from that threat. Anger exists to put us on notice that something is wrong so that we can figure out what is wrong and then fix it. Grief helps us adapt to loss. It's our path to healing, to integrating our losses into our way of being in the world. All of our feelings are tools to motivate changes in our behavior, and even when they are uncomfortable, they serve a positive purpose. Now, there's a simple roadmap, this comes from Psychology Today, to help us work with our feelings skillfully. First, when we become aware of a feeling, we gently and without judgment name it. Then, mindfully and still without judgment, we check in with our body. We allow the physical sensations associated with that feeling to be. We allow those physical sensations to flow. Next, we gently investigate what's driving the feeling. What is at its heart? What is it asking of us or inviting from us? And finally, we offer ourselves kindness and compassion. We should say to ourselves what we would say to a beloved other in a similar situation and bring our self-talk into alignment with the way we talk to the people we love. Now, here's some good news. It's not as hard to feel a boxed up feeling as it is to sort through a whole box of memorabilia or paperwork. Someone once told me that on average, a feeling lasts for about a minute and a half. We can put up with just about anything for a minute and a half, right? Okay, so we ready to practice? Take another deep breath. See if you can identify a boxed up feeling. And then move through the steps with me. First, name it. Next, feel it in your body and let it flow. Investigate what's driving it. Then offer yourself kindness and compassion. Now, true inner peace arises in response to this careful feeling work when we allow ourselves to be present to what is, when we accept reality, accept our response, and integrate the experience into our self-understanding. It's an organic process. We literally evolved to do it, and it helps us continue to evolve and change. So let's move on now to nurturing true peace in our relationships. You know the old saw, you have to go along to get along? It's garbage. Kind of wanted to use another word there. What's more, this old saw is a tool of the kyriarchy, those overlapping systems of oppression that try to keep some people down in order to concentrate power in the hands of the privileged. Glennon Doyle writes about this in her book, Untamed. These are her words. We were taught to believe that who we are in our natural state is bad and dangerous. They convinced us to be afraid of ourselves, so we do not honor our own bodies, curiosity, hunger, judgment, experience, or ambition. Instead, we lock away our true selves. Women who are best at this disappearing act earn the highest praise. She is so selfless. Can you imagine? The epitome of womanhood is to lose oneself completely. That is the end goal of every patriarchal culture, because a very effective way to control women is to convince women to control themselves. We could take out patriarchy and insert racism, insert homophobia. This is how the structures of oppression work. We don't have to go along with the things that don't feel good and right to us. And in fact, going along with them is another form of self-harm. Sure, we don't always get our way in every situation, but we have the right to name what we need and what we don't want. We have the power to negotiate and set boundaries. And it's difficult to make waves this way. Relationships are messy, and often the person who pushes against the system bears the brunt of people's anger at being forced to feel and think and change. But as Glennon puts it, blessed are those brave enough to make things awkward. They wake us up and move us forward. So we aren't all the same. We don't all like the same things. We don't all have the same limits or rhythms, which means we have both a right and a responsibility to advocate for ourselves. And we might hesitate to do so because we're afraid of the consequences. We've been trained to believe that conforming is necessary in order to be accepted. But remember, we only experience true belonging when we are accepted just as we are, when we are both safe and free to be our authentic selves. The Peaceful Leaders Academy defines healthy or constructive conflict as involving an open exchange of differing ideas where all parties feel heard and respected. It is characterized by a spirit of mutual respect and a shared goal of finding a solution beneficial to all involved. Unhealthy conflict, meanwhile, degenerates into personal attacks, power plays. There are about 1 million ways to manipulate or bully others in order to get our way, and all of them are a form of violence. Healthy conflict is the work of creating true peace. It requires that we be clear about what we will and won't do, what we do and don't want. It requires that we communicate those things and stay in that messy place of negotiating until we arrive at a solution that best honors everyone's needs and boundaries. It takes time. The goal is not to find the perfect solution, but rather to come up with a plan that all the people involved can live with. I dream of the day when this is what democracy looks like. But I digress. I'd invite you now to search your heart and see, is there a situation in your life where you've sacrificed your well-being in order to keep the peace? You might know you've found it if you feel a tightness in the pit of your belly or if your jaw clenches. What would it look like to speak up, make waves, get awkward? Sure, there are risks involved, but there's also a possibility for those relationships to deepen and grow, for love and respect and kindness to expand. So breathe into that possibility and get brave. And this brings me to creating true peace in our society. Kazu Haga, the author of our reading, is trained and a trainer in Kingian nonviolence. I'm going to read you his words again. To learn to endure life's challenges with dignity can absolutely be a positive trait, but when it results in a nation of people trying to simply endure trauma, isolation, and living a life without purpose, when people are taught not to speak about injustice and oppression and to stay in their place, that becomes repression and a form of violence. It is negative peace. It is easier in the short term to sweep issues under the rug and settle for a cheap, yet ultimately unsustainable negative peace. It is an entirely different conversation to proactively work against violence and build toward a positive peace that includes justice for all. It requires us to lift the veil off injustice and work to repair the harm. I know these times feel a little apocalyptic, but we need to remember that the word apocalypse means to uncover. It means to pull back the veil. The veil has been lifted, and we have the opportunity to face the pervasive racism and misogyny in our nation and our world. We have the opportunity to face the brokenness of our system. We have the opportunity to face the way social isolation and online echo chambers have degraded and damaged our institutions. This is hard work. It hurts. It's understandable to be afraid and anxious, which is why feeling our feelings has to be a part of the path. But we also need to remember that we're facing these things so that we can change them, so that we can heal them, so that we can deconstruct those structures that are oppressing and causing harm. Now, this church is a place where we covenant to put love at the center. We need to remember it's not a go along to get along kind of love. It is a fierce love, and it asks a lot of us sometimes. As the greed of the most wealthy is uncovered and people find themselves without access to adequate food or housing or health care, the love at the center of our faith demands that we just feed and care for people who are hungry, houseless, or ill. As hate is weaponized and our government starts to attack the vulnerable, the love at the center of our faith demands that we protect and advocate and provide sanctuary to the people who are at risk. And we're not exempt from this fierce love. This love also demands that we care for ourselves, that we be true to who we are, that we tend to our feelings and our psyches and our spirits, no matter how challenging things get. We have to stay human, kind, and relatively sane. True peace is when we arrive at the end of the day and look ourselves in the mirror and know in our bones that we have done everything that love has asked of us. This is what I wish for. It's what I pray for, that each and every one of us might work for true peace and then might find true peace, and in the finding, create the world that we're dreaming of. So be it, and so may it be.